I don't know if anybody's had that experience. But it's like, no, you must do this. No, I don't want to. No, I must do this. No, you don't want to. And when this tug-of-war becomes even separate, and one is able to see this in one's mind, then one is able to see the distinction between ourselves, what the mind is pushing us to do, and what the principles that we should be following. That's when one has choice. But to the extent one just gives oneself to the mind, gives oneself to the external energy, the illusion of choice is there. But then we lose that ability to actually distinguish and actually follow. We're just driven. And when one recognizes this point, actually this is the principal thing to recognize, one's own dependence. And when this point is understood, one voluntarily surrenders to Krishna. And especially when one understands how kind and sweet Krishna is. Prabhupada says there are two reasons why we read Shastra. One, to understand how great Krishna is, and two, to understand how sweet Krishna is. Because someone can be extremely great, but then want to squash us into pulp. Or someone can be extremely sweet, like our mother, but not have the power to protect us. But Krishna has both. He's completely capable of doing everything for us, and at the same time, he's more affectionate, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, than millions and millions of mothers. So when we understand these 2 points, it's like, Krishna, I'm yours. It's only my stubbornness that I don't want to take shelter of your protection. Okay. So coming back to the question, what was Arjuna's mood? What was his state of mind right now? Arjuna is confused about his duty. Yes. And why is he confused?
Because he couldn't come to a conclusion with all his mental speculation.
He couldn't come to a conclusion. And what was the specific vision that he had in front of him? Prabhupada actually mentions it in the purport. He says, it is the man who sees defeat no matter what path he's wanting to take. 2:7. But when Arjuna was of this mentality, that whatever I do, it is my defeat. If I fight and I die, that's my defeat. If I go away, that is my defeat. If I fight and win, I destroy everything that is my happiness. I see my defeat. I don't see anything for me, anything that I would truly benefit from, no matter where I see. And so therefore, he went to Krishna. I see defeat in everything I'm trying to think of. Please instruct me. And the specific phrase that is important here is Shreya. What did we discuss Shreya meant? There are 2 words that Prabhupada, if you hear Prabhupada's lectures on this verse, you will hear Prabhupada describes 2 words, Praya and Shreya. What does Praya mean? Short-term happiness. And Shreya means long-term benefit. So Arjuna was asking for Yat Shreyasyan Nishchitam Bruhitanme. Please instruct me in what is important for my long-term happiness, for my real happiness. And so Krishna, therefore, is about, in verse 8, to test whether he really wants Shreya. Why is it important for a devotee receiving transcendental knowledge to desire Shreya? Why is that important?
That is the transcendental nature of the soul?
Yes and no. Like, for example, a child's long-term happiness isn't going to school. So why is it important that he wants long-term happiness in going to school, not short-term happiness? What happens if the child wants short-term happiness? he or she won't go to school. So to desire long-term happiness, one has to be prepared to accept certain austerities in the short term, to make changes, to be willing to transform one's heart. And that's why one has to seriously want Shreya. One has to see short-term fixes don't work. I can't fix things by myself. I need a long-term solution. I need a vision to follow. And that's what Arjuna is asking for. Okay, text 8. Nahi prapashyami mamanupadyat yacchokamuccoshanam indriyanam avapya puma vasapatnam riddham rajyam suranam abhichadipatyam. Verse, translation.
I can find no means to drive away this grief, which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it even if I win a prosperous and revealed kingdom on earth with prosperity like the demigods in heaven.
So Arjuna's answering Krishna's unspoken question. Krishna is saying, our acharyas say, well, why don't you have knowledge of Shastra, you are a learned and wise man. You presented me with so many good arguments. So use your knowledge of Shastra, find a solution, and then just apply it. Your choices are, if you fight, you get the kingdom, and if you die, you get the heavenly planets. So for me, it's a no-brainer. Fight. But here Arjuna says, can find no means to drive away this grief. This grief is not going to go away, regardless if I win the kingdom or I get Swarga. I need your guidance. And because he is very firmly convinced that no fixing on his own accord will drive away his own grief, and he's fixed in wanting to be instructed by a spiritual master, therefore, Krishna is now willing to instruct him. If a disciple goes before the spiritual master and the spiritual master says, I'm struggling so much. And the spiritual master says, no, well, you can just get that job and then you'll be fine. He'll be like, yes, that's right, thank you very much. And he goes and gets another job. But then, how serious is he in spiritual instruction? If that's all it takes for him to feel happy and solve all his problems, if he's not realized the gravity that no matter where he is, he's always going to face difficulty, then there's no point instructing him. And this is how strict Vedic culture was. Until this depth of realization actually came about, the spiritual master would generally not instruct the disciple. We are very fortunate. Prabhupada sometimes pushes it in, but it was not so in Vedic culture. All right, purport. Although Arjuna was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of the spiritual master, Lord Sri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc. are all useless in solving the problems of life. Help can be given only by a spiritual master like Krishna. Therefore, the conclusion is that a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is the bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. Lord Chaitanya has said that one who is a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is the real spiritual master. Kiba vipra kiba nyasi shudra keninaya ye Krishna tattva veda se guru haya. It doesn't matter whether a person is a vipra, a learned scholar in Vedic wisdom, or is born in a lower family, or is in the renounced order of life. If he is a master in the science of Krishna, he is the perfect and bona fide spiritual master. Satkarma nipuno vipro manta tantra visharadha avaishnava guru nasyad vaishnava swapacho guru. A scholarly Brahmana, expert in all subjects of Vedic wisdom, is unfit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnava or expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. But a person born in a family of a lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is a Vaishnava or Krishna conscious. Why specifically a Vaishnava? There are many transcendentalists who know the difference between a body and the soul. Why specifically a Vaishnava? What does a Vaishnava give that others cannot?
Vaishnavas are worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and they are very merciful and compassionate.
But other transcendentalists are too. They're not as merciful and compassionate, but they are merciful and compassionate. They feel for the sufferings of others. It's one of the characteristics of a liberated soul, actually. But what...
Is it the emphasis on devotion?
Okay.
Maybe missing in other...
Yes, but why is that important?
Because
What hole does it fill in our heart?
Because without devotion to God, there's no foundation. You haven't, you just... It's a shaky house built on sand, isn't it? It's that underlying foundation of devotion to God and then building up from there.
Yes.
That's how I understand it.
Yes, that answer is correct. There's another thought, or another way of phrasing this that comes to my mind. Our heart has a Krishna-shaped hole. And we can put in different kinds of things into that hole. But until and unless we directly put in Krishna, we are never fully satisfied. The reason we are in the material world, we go from lifetime to lifetime looking for solutions, is because our heart is not satisfied. Radhanath Maharaj says, when the heart is empty or unfulfilled, the mind goes crazy. But it's when the heart is actually filled with Krishna consciousness, then our search stops and we feel we're sheltered at home. So to the depth that one understands that our actual position is as Krishna's servant, can only really be a Vaishnava Guru who completely fills that hole in the heart. There was a psychologist in the West, her name was Virginia something, and I quote this very, very frequently because this point touched me so deeply. She writes that every living entity has 7 essential needs, including, for example, to be completely loved, trusted, to be touched in a non-sexual way, etc. And she says that originally these 7 these 7 needs are met in one's relationship with the Lord. She's a Christian, by the way. So she says that originally all of these needs are met in one's relationship with the Lord. But if one cannot find them with the Lord, one has to find these 7 needs in this world. Otherwise, one will end up being psychologically unstable. I love the way this is the only psychologist I've ever heard who's connected Krishna consciousness and the mind in this way. But it is, I'm sure there are other devotees, this is the only one that I've heard. But the point she makes is that the hole that we have in the heart is Radha and Krishna. And to the extent that we don't fill it with Radha and Krishna directly, to that extent we keep searching. Which means that even liberated souls are not complete in their realization.
Are you talking about some lineages, they smoke marijuana and take intoxication? I've noticed things like that. They've got different methods and they say it gives them realizations, but it's under the influence of this external thing.
Yes. Prabhupada actually made that point. He said, if marijuana makes you so satisfied, then, why do you come down? You're on a high, you come down, and then you want more. You're not satisfied with just marijuana. You still need other things also. It doesn't fill the heart. It just temporarily washes it away. And it kills you also.
But there's some lineages, when you go to India, they use it and say it's their tool of self-realization.
Yeah.
So there's the difference between a Vaishnava and maybe someone else who claims to be
a guru. But there are genuine gurus in India who may not be fully Vaishnavas. Like, for example, there are people who worship the Lord for the purpose of liberation. I don't know if, in Maharashtra, there's a saint called Gyaneshwar, for example. Now, the emphasis in his commentary on the Gita is liberation, but with the addition of bhakti. So here's a person who would genuinely, inspires practitioners, if they practice properly, to merge into the effulgence of the Lord. But it's not going to fully complete them in the way devotional service would. So he was a very pure soul from the point of view of his habits. He would never advocate marijuana. Nowadays, spirituality in India has just become anything goes. So that's not at all spirituality. Continuing. The problems of material existence, birth, old age, disease, and death, cannot be counteracted by accumulation of wealth and economic development. In many parts of the world, there are states which are replete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and economically developed. Yet the problems of material existence are still present. They are seeking peace in different ways, but they can achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which constitutes the science of Krishna, through the bona fide representative of Krishna, the man in Krishna consciousness. And this was Prabhupada's experience. He came to the West and he was expecting that people would have some level of happiness. And he then, in later lectures, he commented, when I came to your country, I saw that people were still suffering. You have all the affluence in life. You have wealth, beautiful bodies, strong bodies, good environment, but still you get so many hippies. And Prabhupada said this is why Krishna consciousness is so essential. At the end of this verse, therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asked Krishna to solve his problem definitively, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness, the ultimate solution. Now, sometimes has a pejorative word. It can be used in a pejorative sense. The final solution. It's used in a bad context, but it is actually the ultimate solution to the problems of life. Text 9. Sanjaya uvacha evam uktva rishikesham gudakesha parantapa nayotsya iti govindam uktva tushnim babuvaha. Can someone read the translation?
Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent.
So here Krishna's, so this was the end of Arjuna's conclusion. He just said, I will not fight. There are 3 words here that are important. First, Dhritarashtra must have been very happy that Arjuna is not fighting. He was a principal fight on the Pandava side. To tell Dhritarashtra not to become prematurely happy, Sanjay uses the word parantapa. He says that don't worry, Arjuna is quite capable of defeating his enemies. And he is guided by Rishikesha, the master of his devotee senses. So he's going to very quickly inspire Arjuna's senses to stand up and fight. What does the name Govinda mean?
Lover of cow, giving pleasure.
Go means cow, land, and senses. Vinda means one who gives pleasure to. Our acharyas give another meaning of Govinda. It means the master of the scriptures, or one who reveals the scriptures. So by indicating this, Sanjaya indicates that Krishna is going to very quickly impress Arjuna with the need to perform his duty of fighting. Purport. Dhritarashtra must have been very glad to understand that Arjuna was not going to fight and was instead leaving the battlefield for the begging profession. But Sanjay disappointed him again in relating that Arjuna was competent to kill his enemies. Although Arjuna was for the time being overwhelmed with false grief due to family affection, he surrendered unto Krishna, the supreme spiritual master, as a disciple. This indicated that he would soon be free from the false lamentation resulting from family affection and would be enlightened with perfect knowledge of self-realization. Thus, Dhritarashtra's joy would be frustrated, since Arjuna would be enlightened by Krishna and would fight to the end. Text 10. Tam ovacha rishikesha prahasaniva bharata senayor ubhayor madhye vishidantam midam vachaha. Translation.
O descendant of spoke the end armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna.
Prahasan Eva. So Prahasan means smiling. Eva means kind of like smiling. Not exactly like a full smile, but it was like a twitch of the mouth. Now Prabhupada indicates why he didn't smile fully. Prabhupada says, the talk was going on between intimate friends, namely Rishikesha and Gurukesha. As friends, both of them were on the same level, but one of them voluntarily became the student of the other. Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. It's kind of a quirky situation, right? Imagine if one's friend decides to become one's student. It's a change of relationship, and the change of relationship can be amusing sometimes. You know, the person who, would talk with me, argue with me, now he's just sitting so quietly and listening to me. It can cause a smile. But then Krishna didn't just smile or laugh out aloud. Why would that be inappropriate? Imagine a teacher is trying to discipline a student, and the first thing he does is laugh. How seriously is a student going to take the teacher? You lose the gravity of the relationship. And Prabhupada actually comments on that. He says, as the Lord of all, Krishna is always in the superior position as master of everyone. And yet the Lord agrees to be a friend, a son, or lover for a devotee who wants him in such a role. But when he was accepted as the master, he at once assumed the role and talked with the disciple like the master, with gravity as it is required. It appears that the talk between the master and the disciple was openly exchanged in the presence of both armies, so that all were benefited. And above, Prabhupada says, Krishna was smiling because a friend had chosen to become a disciple. So he was smiling as if, slight twitch of the mouth, but then he became serious. And actually, the spiritual master's relationship with the student is necessarily, at least, it is one of formality to begin with. With time, when the disciple learns to follow the spiritual master's instructions, it becomes one of service and deep affection. This is mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Vasandantam guror hitam acharvan dasavat nicho guru sudrida saurida. Sudrida means like very close, their hearts are very close. Saurida, like a well-wisher. So the disciple becomes very, very close with the spiritual master. But there is still this very distinct hierarchy of master and servant. And sometimes for us who have grown up in a Western climate, this is quite hard to accept. Because we can accept opinions and then take them and think, okay, I will think about it and decide if I want to make a change. But when a master is accepted in this way, then it means that I am actually subordinate, I am actually accountable. And I can't just do whatever I want or think whatever I want. If my spiritual master says something, then it has to mean a change is required. When this gravity is there within the heart, then this relationship works. And sometimes the hardest thing to experience in this relationship is chastisement. Once in Chaupati, who knows Yamuna Mataji? Disciple of Srila Prabhupada. So Yamuna Mataji was in Chaupati. And has anybody read the book Unalloyed? You have?
This is some audio book, because it's like 3 volumes long, it's quite long.
Yeah.
But there are excerpts all the time on Facebook.
Yeah. So there are 2 volumes. The first volume deals with Yamuna Mataji's relationship with Prabhupada when Prabhupada was here. And the second volume deals with her relationship with Prabhupada after Prabhupada had left. And the title Unalloyed indicates her unalloyed mood of devotional service throughout her life, no matter what situation she was in. But through the first volume, you see the depth of her own surrender and how she had imbibed so much of Srila Prabhupada's instructions and his impressions, and molded her life completely according to his instructions. This is why the title of the book is Unalloyed. But years later, when she was in Chaupati, she was giving a class, and she said, how many of you have been chastised by your spiritual master? And of course, in Chaupati, you have thousands and thousands of devotees. Hardly any of them have, dealt with Maharaj personally. His Holiness Radhanath Swami. So one or two raised their hand, or maybe a few raised their hand. And then Yamuna Mataji said, "Oh, so few. Well, those of you who have been chastised are so fortunate." And the word chastise implies that it is a rebuke, it is a criticism, which is the hardest thing to take. But yet actually, that criticism is what stops us from perhaps taking an entirely tangential route in our life. And that is possibly the most mercy that we can ever receive. And she actually said, "You've been really blessed. You've really received mercy." And Yamuna Mataji was chastised so much by Srila Prabhupada. Anyone who's actually been chastised by their spiritual master, so this, you'll probably remember this more than the other affectionate interactions, because this is what, very humbling, and it becomes like a beacon for how you mold and guide your life if one is a sincere disciple. And if one is sincere, Tamal Krishna Maharaj once, in the end, 1977, he lost a key that Prabhupada had given him. And he told Prabhupada, he was very ashamed. He searched everywhere. He racked the whole place upside down. He went to Prabhupada and he said, "Sorry, I lost the key." Prabhupada said, "Because there's nothing here." Can you imagine? After like 10, 11, 12 years of service, after all that he had done, there's nothing here. And then he just took it. But those who could not take Prabhupada's chastisement and retaliated, there's a lecture where Prabhupada says, a devotee comes to Prabhupada and he was taking drugs and he was pointing out that some of Prabhupada's disciples were not following the principles. In that lecture, this is the heaviest thing I've ever heard. Prabhupada told him, "You don't need a spiritual master. Go back to the material world. It's a nice place to enjoy. You go there." But Prabhupada, there's suffering there. No. There's a lot of enjoyment in the material world. You go back and enjoy. Can you imagine Prabhupada saying that? This is basically saying, you're not willing to take instructions. And this is the worst thing. When you hear this from your spiritual master, one should know that one's spiritual life is finished. And one has to take steps to rectify it, otherwise one is going nowhere. But the spiritual master can say things even like this. And if one is willing to accept it, because of the gravity of the relationship, and work on it, even however hard it may be, then one will progress. Otherwise, one will just never go anywhere.
see, yes, it does help with the
that potential. So this is the first mood. The second mood is one has to have established a relationship. If one sees it, one may be able to see that difference, and one may even know what the right thing to say is. But if one doesn't have a relationship with that individual, and one knows that that devotee is not going to take his criticism in the right way, the proper etiquette is to go to somebody whom that devotee can trust, and request that, inform that devotee and request him if he can take the appropriate steps. So both have to be there, a relationship and genuinely acting for the, even if, like for example, even if what one says is right, but it is not spoken with the intention of helping, that actually becomes an offense to a Vaishnava. So one has to be very, very careful. Even if one says something like, this devotee takes too much prasadam, or, this devotee always talks a lot, this devotee is very frivolous, this devotee wastes a lot of time. It's a very casual comment, but it carries a lot of implications, and one will notice it in one's chanting very strongly. And if one is very attentive in one's chanting, one's mind becomes very conscious before making such statements. But I remember I was serving my spiritual master once, and he told me, I brought him juice, I think late in the evening, and then he spent an hour just, taking me apart. He had spent an hour in the morning taking me apart, and then, because that day I slept for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I was just so tired. But then he was like, what are you doing? You're just sleeping all day? And I thought you were going to do this and that. You were just sleeping all day? And he was really disgusted. And then he came in the evening, and in my mind I was thinking, but I'm just trying to serve. Just please accept the service, and don't correct me so much. And then I remember I went back in the evening, and then he said, wait. And then he said, it is not that I'm just taking service from you, but as reciprocation, my service to you is to correct you. And that's why I'm saying these things. Otherwise, why does it matter? But anyway, text 11.
Hare Krishna, it's just a very important So when basically, I know my husband tells me the same thing, that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj would not chastise a person for 12 years. I mean, we just wouldn't speak anything. So does that mean that we should not tell people anything, basically, even if someone submits a person to them? I don't want to make offenses in that sense, trying to understand this.
No.
We always like just stay quiet.
No, the actual mood is like if, for example, you were someone's sister or brother, how would you speak to that individual?
So nice day.
But also you would build a relationship. A relationship is not that, Prabhu, you didn't do this. That's not a relationship. But, I mean, when you really have a Vaishnava relationship as a brother and sister or as a mother and son or father and daughter, you can say a lot of things. Once Radhanath Maharaj was asked this question in a different way. The question was, what happens if a colleague of ours says something? How do you correct that person? And Maharaj said, the way that I prefer to do it is you show a lot of affection in the relationship. You build a relationship for the sake of a relationship. And then even when you speak truths, there's a clear entrance of that truth into that person's heart. Otherwise it doesn't go in. So speak the truth, but in the context of a relationship. And it's very natural. It happens in this world also. That's how you say things. Yeah. Text 11. Now this is the beginning of Krishna's chastisement. He's already chastised Arjuna, but now as a spiritual master. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Asochananvashochastvam Pragyavadamscha Bhashase Gatasun Agatasumscha Nanashochanti Panditaha. Translation.
Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead.
The beginning of all instruction is to tell the devotee or tell the individual to unlearn the things that they've learned. And Krishna is saying that, Arjuna, you actually don't know anything. You're speaking many learned words, but in actual fact, if you were learned, you would not be speaking what you've just spoken. So it actually means you don't know anything. And why is it that you don't know anything? Because even though you're quoting Shastra, you're quoting authority, you're saying so much will happen, but all your arguments are based on a principle which should not evoke lamentation in the heart of someone who's truly learned. Asocyan means it is not worthy of lamentation. Anvasochastvam, you are lamenting that which is not worthy of lamentation. Devotees lament when they lose Krishna. Devotees rejoice when they get Krishna. But imagine one is in the middle of a kirtan and one begins to, lament. Oh, my, I missed that, basketball game on TV, or this lecture is going on too long. But it's a different. One's mind and one's identity is fixed in something else. But the mark of learning is not theory. The mark of learning is a transformation of the heart. And the transformation is a change of one's identity from I and mine in this world. And this is the entire transformation of Krishna consciousness. From a sense of I and mine in this world to a sense of I and mine in Krishna. And to the extent that one is actually learned, one's consciousness will be fixed here. When I was young, I was given a Gayatri thread, as many young Indians are in Vedic culture. And at that time, the Vaishnava guru who had given me this thread, he quoted a story. He said there was a guru with two disciples, and this guru would teach the same instruction over and over and over again. But the first disciple was very satisfied with this teaching. The second disciple was not. And he just wanted to progress and learn all the Vedas, and he wanted to just grow academically. So he identified another teacher. He took permission from this teacher. The teacher said, may you learn happily and be satisfied. The second student went to the other teacher. Within 2 years, he mastered all the Vedas from a technical perspective. And he happily came back to his first guru, offered obeisances. The guru was very happy to see his disciple. He welcomed him in, said, "Son, take bath. We'll have some prasadam for you." And the first disciple was still there, learning the same mantras that they had been learning over the last 2, 3, 4 years. And when the second disciple went to the well, because that's how you used to take bath, to draw water, he noticed that there's no bucket there, because you have a rope. You lower the bucket into the well, you draw water, and you pour it on yourself. So he went back to the guru and said, "Gurudev, there's no bucket. What should I do?" And then the spiritual master said, "Oh, okay, one second." He called the first disciple, "Please help your god brother." So the first disciple went there, and the same mantra that the guru had taught him for 3, 4 years, he began to recite it. The water in the well, this is a true pastime from the scriptures. The water level started rising in the well and came up to the very top. And then the first disciple took a bucket that was not attached to a rope, picked up the water and said, "Here, please take it." Who was actually learned? The first disciple. One can have a lot of academic knowledge, but only to the extent that one has applied it in one's life is one actually learned. And that's the point Krishna is making here. Asochan anvasochastvam. You are lamenting for what is not worthy of lamentation. Pragyavadams chabhashase. Pragya means one who is actually learned or realized. Pragyavadams. You are talking the talk of realized men. But in actual fact, you are not a learned man. What does it mean to say you are talking the talk of learned men? You are talking the talk of doctors. You are not a doctor. That's the intention. Gadasun agatasumscha. For gadasun, for that life that is not past, agatasumscha, the life that has passed, neither for the living nor for the dead. Nanu sochanti pandita. A pandita, one who is actually learned, laments for neither the living nor for the dead, nor for the dead. Is that because he's heartless? Yes. So it's like there's a hurricane in some part of Queensland or in the USA, cyclone something. 200 people died, their shelter was destroyed. It's temporary, material existence happens. Is that how the liberated soul thinks? Yes? It sometimes feels like that, right? Liberated souls cannot have a heart, they must be heartless. But actually the characteristic of a liberated soul is his compassion, or her compassion. So the difference is this, that they would be concerned, they know that life is going to end at some point. So they don't lament that someone has died. But what they lament after is that this person didn't have a chance to grow internally in their life. And yes, they actually feel bad when they see external disturbance also. But they don't just, if someone passes away, they don't think, "Oh my God, he passed away, he didn't live life to the full, he studied so much, all his parents are," on the news they show all these sob stories, how people are just crying, and these mother and victim impact statements. Like they just say, "He was so dear to me, he was a brother, he was so loving, he was this." But the wise man would say, yes, they are suffering and I feel for their pain. But I can also see that this individual has put in a substantial amount of work to go closer to Krishna. And I know Krishna will take care of him. Thinking of this, they feel happy. Because they see the progress of that living entity from life to life. They feel sad when they see pain. When Prabhupada was in Mayapur, he was standing, I think, outside the Chakra building, which was the first building to be built. There's a Chakra and the Lotus. The Conch and the Lotus building. I think the Conch building is the guest house. The Chakra building the Lotus building was where Prabhupada had his quarters. So Prabhupada was standing there, and just underneath the building there was a garbage heap of where devotees had thrown their plates, after, the leaf plates, after taking prasadam. And Prabhupada saw literally he saw two young boys, hardly 6-7 years old, fighting with dogs for the remnants of food. They were that hungry. And when Prabhupada saw that, he literally began to tear up. Like he was just, like tears were there. And then he made a famous proclamation that devotees have heard. He said, no one should go hungry within 10 kilometers or 10 miles of the Mayapur temple. So devotees or liberated souls are not heartless, but they see everything in connection to the soul's eternal journey to Krishna. They don't just lament for the body independent of the journey of the soul. Another example, one of the brahmacharis in the Sydney ashram, Dashrath Prabhu, can I share this example of Baba Prabhu and Maharaj's instruction to him? Can I share that example? You're okay with that? So Prabhuji's son, Bhava Vibhushan Prabhu, is a really amazing, you've seen him. Bhava Vibhushan Prabhu is a brahmachari in this ashram. So when he joined the ashram, as parents, they naturally felt distress. But then they went to Bhakti Rasamrita Swami. And Maharaj gave them a perspective, and this is the most amazing perspective I've heard on the situation. Maharaj told them, understand that the soul goes from place to place and gathers experiences according to the need for the soul's need for development. Understand that Krishna has placed the soul for these many years under your care. But now this soul needs another place for his development. And so therefore he is gone to the ashram. So don't lament that your son has left you, but just understand that Krishna is taking care of the soul and guiding him from one place to another. And also understand that you as spirit souls are also being guided by Krishna from the situation that you were in before, to the situation that you are in now, to the situation that you will be in the future. Is that right, Prabhuji? That is the advice? Who finds this amazing? This is the most amazing perspective I've ever heard on this situation. And this is how a liberated soul sees a situation. Ordinary, for those parents who are not Krishna conscious or who don't have this perspective, when they see their son, because their son or daughter, it represents a life investment. All the money that one has earned, you put a picture of your children at work, when you work, and your life investment, your time, your energy, your money, everything has been for your children. It's like, 100% loss on your life investment. And parents actually feel like that. But if one understands the journey in proper perspective, then one won't lament simply on the bodily platform. And Maharaj could understand Prabhuji's pain and the family's pain, but he was able to speak words that were able to completely alleviate their pain. All right, purport. The Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, "You are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition." As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. So he was saying that there's a shastra, Artha Shastra. Artha means wealth or personal gain. So there is Dharma Shastra, there's Artha Shastra, Kama Shastra, and Moksha Shastra. So because these are the four so-called Purusha Arthas, the four goals of human life. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Has anybody not heard this list before? Okay. So in Artha Shastra, of course, there's a lot of description about politics, sociology, and so on and so forth. But higher than just higher than just economic development is obviously scriptures that speak about religious principles. And that was what Arjuna was arguing. He was saying it is more important to be tolerant, to be forgiving, to respect one's elders. rather than just fight for one's right. And of course, he's right in that respect. But what he didn't understand is that above Dharma Shastra is another kind of scripture that speaks about the spirit soul, the Moksha Shastra. But even higher than that are the Bhakti Shastras. And Arjuna understood neither the principles of the Moksha or the Bhakti Shastras, and Bhagavad Gita explains both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology, but he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the Supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very, very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. Text 12. Natva evaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadipa, nachaiva na bhavishyama, sarve vayam mataparam. So this is the very first of Krishna's instructions. And it is extraordinary. Can someone read the translation? So in the very beginning, there are three fundamental truths being established. One, that never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you. In other words, you and I have always been eternal and eternally separate from time immemorial. Of course, nor are we matter, but you and I are fundamentally separate. And these kings also have always been fundamentally separate. Never was there a time when each of these kings as spirit souls, nor I, nor you have ever not existed, and nor will there ever be in the future a time when we shall not exist separately. So we were separate. We are obviously separate now. We were separate in the past, and we always will be separate in the future. Why is this teaching given in the very beginning? Pretty much. To emphasize that a relationship with Krishna is there in the past, present, future, and that alone is the path for liberation. This verse is being spoken. To pave the way to describe bhakti, to pave the way to describe that eternal relationship with Krishna, this point is emphasized. Now, Prabhupada in his purport will make two essential points. He will say that one, yes, Krishna, the living entity, and everyone else are eternally separate, but also it is not that they're all the same. So here is Prabhupada's purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad as well as in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities. Here is the verse. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman tam atmastam ye nupashyanti dhiras tesham shanti shashvati netaresham. So nityo nityanam. Nitya means eternal. Nityanam. He's the one eternal among all the eternals. Chetanas chetananam. Among those who are conscious, he is conscious. Eko bahunam. He is eka. And for the bahu, for the many, Yo vidadhati. Dhati means to give. Vidadhati, one who gives. Kaman. He's the one who supplies their desires. He's the one who provides or facilitates the other eternals and other conscious entities' needs. So here's Prabhupada's translation. It is said that just above, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Tam atmastam ye anupashyanti dhiras. Atmastam, he is present in their atma. He is present in their heart. Only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. Tam atmastam, that person who is present within their heart. Ye, those who, anupashyanti. Pashyanti means to see. Pashya means to see. Anupashyanti means one who can see according to the scriptures, who can see according to authorities. Dhiras. Dhira means one who is sober, one whose mind is fixed in knowledge of the difference between body, soul, and supreme soul as being different from each other. Tesham, so such learned people who are able by the strength of their following their superiors, who are able to see this one eternal among many eternals, one conscious entity among many conscious entities within the region of their heart. Tesham, they, shanti, they achieve shanti or peace, which means liberation. It's like saying they achieve Vaikuntha. You know what the term Vaikuntha means? No anxiety. Kunta means anxiety. Vaikuntha means no anxiety. So Tesham Shanti, they actually achieve peace. Shashvati, eternally. Not just peace for being 6 foot under the ground. But Tesham Shanti Shashvati, they achieve eternal peace. Na itaresham, itara means others. Others do not. So this principle of recognizing the Supreme Lord and recognizing his preeminence among the eternals and the conscious living entities is an essential principle to achieve any kind of transcendental result. Prabhupada says, the Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living beings, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situations. Important statement. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is a supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation, the individual soul, separated by the covering of Maya or illusion, will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Which Mayavad theory emphasizes this? You know the example that impersonalists use to describe this? They say that imagine you have air, but you take a pot. Within the pot, you have a localized bit of air. So for somebody who's in this conditioned state, who has a pot-like material body, you see the separation between the air inside the pot and the air outside the pot. But if you break this pot and you just make it, fragments, then you see that this air and the totality of air are one. So this is the example they use. Prabhupada's response to this example is that who said living entities are pots? The point is that you have to give an example that actually establishes similarities. then the question would be, well, how did the pot come about? How did the pot come about? It just materialized out of air? Is that an illusion? Or if somebody thinks the pot is there, who's that somebody? How did you suddenly differentiate one little bit of conscious, separate thought out of this one complete, all-knowing, blissful thought? And why would you split off in this way? Many New Age groups argue that you have individual parts of Brahman that need to come to this world to experience something in this world. After they satisfy their experience, they go back. Well, why did that desire come about? So everything was one Brahman, everything was completely satisfied, and then suddenly a part of Brahman, which is actually a logical, doesn't make sense. A part of Brahman, well, everything is Brahman, but a part of Brahman somehow suddenly decided that it needed an experience. It put itself under illusion, and then it decided to suffer in this world and learn from that suffering and then go back to Brahman. Honestly, people believe this, but it doesn't make any sense. And that's the point Prabhupada makes here. This statement of Krishna is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual, but material. But accepting the argument that the individuality is material, how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Because Krishna is transcendental, right? Prabhupada would say, if you do not accept Krishna as being transcendental, why are you reading his Bhagavad Gita? Come up with your own conclusion. If you're accepting the Bhagavad Gita, you're accepting that this is a transcendental scripture and transcendental opinion, then you have to accept that Krishna is a liberated soul. And as a liberated soul, he's providing his specific direction. In this instance, Ramanuja also gives the following point. He says, imagine you have an impersonal liberated soul who's kind of liberated. He's now speaking of how he's speaking to people who are conditioned, and he's telling them that you now need to focus on liberation. Ramanuja asks this question. If this person is truly liberated, why is he talking to himself? There's just one. Everything is one. Whom is he going to talk to? So if he's truly liberated, he should just shut up. And if he's not liberated, then why are we listening to him? This argument is very hard to get around, actually. Anybody who's speaking according to their idea of duality is an illusion. There's no point listening to someone who's an illusion. Sometimes they will also argue that, this person is actually liberated, but they pretend to be an illusion to instruct those who are in illusion. They can pretend anything they want, but if they're still talking, if they really know that everything is one, why would they even pretend to come down and pretend as if there's difference? And two, whom are they speaking to still? It doesn't answer that question. Why are they speaking? If they're speaking, they must have a perception that I know something that someone else doesn't, and I need to convey this knowledge. But then, if there's a difference in knowledge, a difference in consciousness, there's different entities. Impersonalists also say that I am consciousness. Do you understand this statement? The moment I understand that I'm Brahman, I am Brahman. So that's why they equate themselves with their consciousness. They are what they perceive. But Vaishnavas say that we have consciousness. What this means is that I am a spirit soul, a servant of Krishna. My consciousness can be at many different levels. It can be an illusion, can be in the state of liberation. It's not that I'm just what I perceive. But what I perceive determines whether I'm an illusion or not. Was that confusing, or is that okay?
Sorry, once again, why are we so focused on Mayavadi?
Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. There are two roadblocks to devotional service. The philosophy of voidism, or atheism also, and the philosophy of impersonalism. You dig a little bit into the heart of most people who are not Krishna conscious and not willing to become Krishna conscious, you will notice these two principles. And so you may call them Mayavadis, you may call them impersonalists, but those roadblocks have to be removed with knowledge or education. The second point is, if we dig within our own heart, we will notice traces of Shunyavad and impersonalists. Kirtanananda Maharaj tells a story that, he would hear Prabhupada, these Mayavadis, and he was wondering, who are these Mayavadis? And then in one lecture he said, he's made some statement indicating that there's a difference between Krishna and his body. Krishna said, this is Mayavad philosophy. Such rascals should not be listened to. And then Kirtanananda Maharaj understood, oh, I am that Mayavadi. So the point is that there are so many impersonalistic and atheistic tendencies even within our own heart. And we read this to purify our own misconceptions and to understand the specific roadblocks that people have to actually preach bhakti. Do you know who actually gave Prabhupada this pranam mantra? Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharani. Anybody know? Do you know who wrote it? Prabhupada himself. His disciples asked Prabhupada, how can we worship you? Prabhupada said, Namo Vishnu Padaya, because that's how every person is glorified. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prashtaya Putra, Srimade Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namane, Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane. And then you say your spiritual master's name also. But then they asked Prabhupada, is there one other thing? And then Prabhupada wrote this down and gave it to them. So this is Prabhupada's mission. Once Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he wrote in his thesis, he said, there are two things that throughout Prabhupada's book, his specific contribution to Gaudiya Vaishnava theology were two things. One, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. You will see this emphasis throughout Prabhupada's purport. The supreme personality of Godhead, not impersonalist, not anything else. Second, bhakti he translates as being devotional service, not just devotion. It is active cultivation, active engaging in Krishna's service. But these two things are specifically Prabhupada's contribution. His terminology, his emphasis. And to deeply, deeply, deeply understand Prabhupada's mood, one has to understand why impersonalism and voidism or atheism is so detrimental to our bhakti and bhakti in general. Prabhupada actually said the majority of atheism in the world actually has come about because of impersonalism. Do you know why? Because when the concept is there that after this life, or if in the state of liberation, I lose all the experiences that I'm after, you become more focused on your experiences now. And it has actually produced a whole group of sense enjoyers who talk in an armchair philosophical way about liberation, transcendence, spirituality, but in and out they're materialists. Meaning that their heart, which has a Krishna-shaped hole, has not been properly filled. Because impersonalism is not that gap that can fill their heart.
Also, isn't it like even if they're practicing any religion for that matter, no matter how much they do it, first of all, they're not going to get back to Godhead. And if someone is really like just good and compassionate, they'll have to take birth again in Krishna consciousness.
I don't follow that statement.
There was a class going on in our study group, and then my Shiksha Guru told this person was asking, but then these religious people are also nice. Some of them are nice, impersonalists, who want to be merging into Brahman, but they are just kind-hearted, compassionate. So my Shiksha Guru said if they are following that, they are not going to go back to Godhead. There's only one point they can go back if Shivji is going, because they are very much Shiv Bhakta. So if Shivji is going on some Kirtan and chanting Hare Krishna, and there is a time in the morning and in the evening, there are particular two times. She was quoting from Shastra obviously, and they said if they're leaving their body at that time on that day, and if Shivji is going on Harinam Sankirtan, they may translate into the spiritual world. But most of the chances are they're going to come back into the material world and become Krishna devotees. Even these people, if they're practicing that voidism or impersonalism, then also they just have to come back to the material.
That's interesting information. Thank you. But you know the philosophical truth behind this? That who's in control of the material energy? Krishna. So who's going to remove the influence of the material energy? Krishna. So if you don't worship Krishna, then you stay in this world. Anyway, let's continue. Next verse. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. So in the previous verse, Krishna said, everyone's eternal. So the implication is you don't need to cry for anybody because they're eternal. But then still, the point is that they're leaving their body, right? So there's something to be lamented for. Their body, which they've invested so much of their time, skills, life in, that is changing, that is going away. So here is Krishna's answer. Can someone read the translation?
As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by the change.
So Krishna is saying, you're thinking about just one part of change, but there are so many parts in one's life where there are transitions anyway. Like imagine how many here as mothers have or do love the activities of the young children. Have you ever heard of mothers expressing that they miss their children when they grow past that age? Of 0 to 5, 0 to 7, they become teenagers, they become completely independent. Yeah? You miss being able to hold them, cuddle them, and then, come back, home to them when they're off with their friends and they have a different style of life. They have a totally different body. Every 7 years their body changes, and their minds have completely changed to the point that you can hardly recognize who they are. Isn't that true? My sister and I had gone to Mayapur for Bhakti Shastri one year, and we came back 3 months later. My mother was just looking at us. I said, Mom, what? She said, I'm trying to get to know my children again because we had changed so much in those 3-4 months there. Then, of course, we became normal. But it was very interesting. After that time, parents are like, I hardly know this person. They're just so very different. They talk so very differently. And then they pass those teenage years, and then they become young adults, and they're like almost different people again. They have different mindset. Of course, they've gained wisdom. They remember so much of what has happened. But they've transited to another part of life. So, dehino asmin yata dehi kaumaram. Kaumaram means what? Youth. Sorry? Boyhood. Well, kaumaram typically means 0 to 5 years old. But in this context, it just generally means like young age. Yauvanam means as a young adult. You transit from being a young child to a young adult, to jara, an old age. And throughout all of these things, there are phenomenal transitions. Now, if death is described as just being a transition, do we not die many times in our life? If our hopes and dreams completely are shattered, don't we say, I've died? A part of me has died? We die so many times in one life. But because we are fixated, and because the body in an older age looks similar to the body in a younger age, we tend to think, oh, it's this person, same person. And yes, it is the same person, but as spirit soul. And the body is changing all the time. And they have died. Prabhupada says they die continuously. Every day their body is changing every second. So what are you lamenting about? At the end of life, it is just a change. As much as one has transited through several phases of life, one goes through that change and just goes somewhere else and continues to change in another body. So so the verse says, Dhiras tatra naha muyati. So dhira means one who is sober, one who is not intoxicated by the effect of material nature, who actually sees reality in a clear and considered way. Tatra, seeing this change, naha muyati, he is not bewildered.
But when you're transitioning from childhood to youth, old age, you have a connection to the self. You retain some memories, you have attachments to others.
You do, but I, as the observer, may not.
Yeah.
Like, for example, your mother, as you are now, surely she deals with you slightly differently to when you were younger. So for her, more independence, a separate lifestyle.
Yeah.
There you were completely under her guidance and control. But now you're not.
But when you to death to a new soul, your soul retains its eternal. Come to a new body. Like you destroyed childhood to get a youth.
Yes.
You've died in that self.
Yes.
You come to another body, but you don't retain the memories. You may. I read somewhere that if you do pious activities, Krishna allows that.
Krishna may, yes.
May allow that to come to your next life.
Yes.
And then you have a propensity or inspiration to learn more spiritual wisdom, to build on what you've learned. But the memories of all the work and efforts and experiences or whatever you've had are forgotten in the next body. And
But that happens in this life also. I mean, teenagers hardly remember what they did when they were children. And adults would maybe prefer to forget their teenage years. And in old age, you can hardly remember anything. I mean, it substantially happens here. And oh yes, there were good memories, but I can't walk like I used to. Oh, I hit a tennis ball like that. Yeah, but I can't walk. I mean, people just prefer, therefore they live through their grandchildren and children. But they forget so much of their past life. And the example Shastra sometimes uses to describe this is like, if you are sleeping and you wake up, in your sleep you seem to have a different body and you do different things. And it's real. But then you wake up, you forget that dream state. And similarly, when you change bodies, your previous states were just like a dream. Oh, I was once at university and I once studied. But it's like, visions of boyhood from God knows when. They float before you. There's a song, you know that song? Visions of boyhood float them before you. Echoes of dreamland shall bear them along. But it's just like a dream that just comes and just goes. It's like it's a memory. But you can have memories of sleep as well if you wanted to.
Sometimes I wonder why we have the desires from young age, and I see my kids have, certain needs or something that really, they really, and I wonder why, they have this, that sort of explains what you were saying. It carries on. It carries on.
The impressions carry on even from one life to another.
Yeah.
So it's not that, for example, a person who's interested in a musician, they've carried those impressions for many lifetimes. Even sometimes skills across many lifetimes. But this transition is actually very similar. And for the person who is actually sober, they don't see a difference between these transitions. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? It's a very different perspective on life. But they see the journey of the soul. And that's what remains as a constant factor for them. An interesting point also, in the 4th canto Bhagavatam, Pritha Maharaj says, because Venu had died, the king Vena, he was very dictatorial and very cruel king. So when Vena died, Pritha Maharaj asked, whom should I hate? Should I hate the soul who was put under Maya? Should I hate his mind? Should I hate his body? Whom am I actually hating? Because the soul has just gone on, and the soul is unfortunately going to suffer to rectify that incorrect mentality. But should I feel sorry for him or should I hate him? Whom am I hating? I don't even know him to hate him. A sober person sees things very differently. So, purport. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona. They're going to get new bodies, right? Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in the heavenly bodies, for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause for lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. Text 14. Now, Arjuna's argument will still be, but still, yes, it is true. What you say is true, but I still have a connection with them in that body. And that was the point you were making. I still, as Bhishma's grandson, Dronacharya's disciple, I still relate to them on the bodily platform. And I will feel pain when they leave their body. So this is Krishna's answer to this question. And it's actually a life lesson for how to deal with things in one's life. Here's the verse. Matra sparshastu kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukkadha agama payino nityas tam sitikshashva bharata. This is a verse of extraordinary power. Matra sparsha. Sparsha means to touch. Matra sparsha. So temporary touch or just sensory touch. Tu kaunteya sita ushna sukha dukkhada. Sita means winter, ushna means summer, the heat of summer. Sukha dukkhada. And it is just its happiness from the sensory perception is like the coming and going of winter and summer seasons. When it is winter, everything in the body pains, like the knees pain, the soul's pain. It's too cold to go outside. And then the winter rolls away and it becomes spring and it's very pleasant and it's wonderful to go outside except one has hay fever. And then it becomes summer when it's blazing hot and there's one has to stay inside and eat ice creams. But then it becomes autumn and it's very pleasant, it's so beautiful, but then it rains and then it's winter again. So the pleasures and happiness of each season, they just come and go. Or if one considers one season to be pleasurable, another season to be unpleasurable, again, that comes and goes. Sometimes they say of Melbourne weather, if you don't like the weather, just wait a minute or two. But it's kind of like that. You don't like, the situation you're in life, wait a while, sometimes. Agama, it comes, apayana, it disappears. Anitya, it is not permanent. And therefore, because it is not permanent, tam stitik shashva bharata. So therefore just try to tolerate it, O descendant of Bharata. Yes, you will feel pain if Bhishma and Drona die, but knowing that this is for your ultimate benefit, just try and tolerate that pain. Try and take pleasure on the platform of the spirit soul. Your internal growth, their internal growth. Know that Krishna has a plan for them. Know that Krishna has a plan for you. But any temporary pain that is there, even the pain itself is temporary. So just try and tolerate it. So here's Prabhupada's purport. Can someone read the translation, sorry?
O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance and their disappearance in due course. or cover up, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed.
Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January, February. That's when winter is in India. It is very cold at that time. But in spite of that, a man who abides by religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season in India. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas. And although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya. If one becomes very involved just in one's mind, in one's own bubble, thinking in terms of happiness and distress, one actually cannot focus on introspection, on one's inner development. And so that part of one's life will be lost. But imagine if one goes through some difficulty in one's life, one tries to see what is the plan that Krishna has for me in this. And what is that verse by Brahma? One who simply tolerates the distress given by the Lord and continues to worship him with one's body, mind. Has anybody heard this verse? Body, mind, and words. For him, Dhayabak, just as a son naturally inherits the father's wealth, the son of the Lord inherits the kingdom of God. This is the verse by Brahma. One simply tries to see, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, that the difficulties that I have in my life are because of improper practice of bhakti. And the happiness that I have is because of proper practice of bhakti. And this devotee focuses on bhakti, on just worshipping the Lord with one's body, mind, and words, not criticizing the Lord, but trying to see the plan of the Lord, trying to see the Lord's affection through one's life situations. In other words, feeling sheltered in the Lord, because this is life's essential transition, to understand how we are completely sheltered by the Lord, to transfer our shelter from this world to the Lord. And if that happens, if we just remain alive in Krishna consciousness, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, then the kingdom of God becomes our automatic inheritance.
Having faith in God in the hardships that you have in life.
It's a little bit deeper than faith, because faith implies, okay, Krishna, I know you're doing something good, I know you're doing it, but I don't get it. It's not quite like that. It's actually an experience that the devotee has. When a devotee is actually worshipping the Lord, they go through a difficult situation, and at some point, especially if they're sheltered by a community of devotees, they understand that this was possibly the best thing that could have happened to me. And there was this one devotee, he had gone through a very messy divorce. His children had left him, and he was in an incredible amount of pain. Somehow, at the result, and before that he was working so hard, he didn't have much time for Krishna consciousness either. I think it's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada actually. And so when he was going through this difficulty, he picked up this habit of just constantly chanting Krishna's names, and he would just chant day long, like every day. And even when he was sleeping, he would be remembering the holy names. And through all that life experience, at the end, he just couldn't stop chanting. He had an incredible taste for chanting. You ask him what his experience was like. Time for Krishna consciousness, to now he was just fully absorbed in chanting Krishna's names. And yes, he had gone through hardship for some 5-6 years, but look at the result. Krishna had taken away those things that were blocking him from devotional service. And as much as, for example, removing a splinter or a bullet has its share of pain, but the result is a healthy leg. And one can choose to walk with, a crutch all one's life. But Krishna sometimes takes off that bullet, and it's Krishna! But then it's like, hey, I can walk again, I can run again. I can run! And it becomes a completely different experience. But that's the devotee's experience. It's actually experienced by the devotee.
Deeper appreciation,
Realization. And when a devotee experiences this, then their depth of shelter in the Lord increases. But those of us who, for example, in a difficult situation, stop our practice of Krishna consciousness, and then, actually this happened, a father and son, devotee father and son, they'd gone rock climbing together. Now when they were rock climbing, somehow a rock became loose, and it came and hit the son straight on the head. His skull was crushed, he died instantly. This father was so overwhelmed. He was thinking, we are practicing devotees, we've been serving in the temple for years. Why has this happened? I can't take this anymore. He left devotional service. Now, what is the consciousness of such an individual? How did they see Krishna consciousness?
Was he expecting some kind of return, maybe? Like if I do devotional service, then therefore I will get some kind of good luck, or that bad things won't happen to me?
Tendency to, and we all have this.
Yeah.
But, and this was a shock beyond, if he had lost some money, maybe he wouldn't have minded. But this shock was way too much for him. But to the extent that one understands Krishna consciousness as being Krishna, allowing us to become more and more sheltered under his lotus feet. We understand that part of the process. And to understand this, one needs the community of very affectionate devotees. One needs to have devotees who have bhakti, wisdom, empathy. And when one is sheltered among those devotees, one becomes able, in that association, to see Krishna's plan in one's life. In Melbourne, previously, not so much now, you would have many students who were international students. And so therefore, they would go through a very tough time, paying their bills, trying to get a job, trying to get a PR, a permanent residency in Australia. And I've seen the amount of anxiety they've gone through. Practically they've had 2-3 hours of sleep for days on end. But you see them in the temple, and sure, they had this on their mind, but they were far, far less anxious than many other international students of my experience. I asked them, how do you feel? You must be feeling anxious. He said, yes, I'm concerned. But then he said, we have this in Melbourne, they have right in front of the temple, not front, but down the street, they have an entire building they call Bhakta Bhavan. Every apartment in that building has been rented out by devotees, and mostly by these kind of students or by families, very young families. And so for them, they would always come together and they would play cricket together, they would study together, they would go to Mangalarti together. It was a family. And in their association, they just somehow had this faith, Krishna will take care. And that is the value of devotees' association. If one doesn't have that, one is not granted the vision or the wisdom or that comfort, that security in one's heart that Krishna will take care of one.
So is that why the guy left? Because he doesn't sport?
Maybe. I only heard this as from another devotee. I don't know this devotee firsthand.
Also, what Shikshaguru used to say in the class, Maya Devi has a very strong purpose, and she is going to make a lot of tests. Because if Krishna accepts you as a devotee, then actually Krishna becomes your servant. So Maya Devi is very cautious of who becomes a servant. She'll always throw hardship because they wants to make sure that they're actually real devotees, no matter what is happening.
That is one perspective, but the other perspective is that Maya Devi is Krishna's servant.
Yeah.
She doesn't do anything independent of Krishna. So the devotee doesn't think, oh, Maya's testing me, Krishna. No. But it's actually he sees or she sees that it's Krishna who is trying to teach me something. The deepest understanding of karma is what is Krishna's plan for that individual. So devotees don't pray to Maya Devi. They go to Krishna directly. Interestingly, Sachinanda Maharaj has a very ferocious picture of Maya Devi in his room where his base is. And when he feels like he needs a jolt, he goes and looks at that picture of Maya Devi. And he feels, okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. But typically devotees don't do that. All right. So here, so Krishna also addresses Arjuna in two terms. Kaunteya, which means son of Kunti, and Bharata, descendant of Bharata, of that great Kuru dynasty race. So Prabhupada says, the two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. For one who comes through from greatness, great things are expected. And that's the point that Krishna is making. Also, Kaunteya implies that Krishna and Arjuna have a connection with each other, because Kunti and Krishna's father are brother and sister. Text 15. Now the benefit of tolerating in the course of one's duty is described. Yam hi na vyatayante te purusham purusharshaba samadukka sukam dhiram somritatvaya kalpate. Translation.
O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation.
Because this individual is not just going by their mind, they're seeing the transition of the soul. If they're not disturbed by happiness and distress, or they're able to tolerate it. It also means that if someone has the depth of shelter to tolerate these circumstances, they need to have a depth of shelter that is truly transcendental, Krishna. Therefore, they are fit for liberation. Purport. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness, is certainly a person eligible for liberation. What does this phrase mean? Steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization. What does that imply about the consciousness of the individual? But determination comes from the mind. Determination is actually a function of the intelligence. I will do this. This is it. And using that steady intelligence, one trains one's mind. And that intelligence comes from where? Association of devotees, chanting Krishna's name, study of Shastra. So when these three things are prominently there in our life, then our determination is also very strong. Regardless of what happens, one's mind is focused that this is the goal of my life. Yes, I know there are many things going up and down, but this is the goal of my life. And if any one of these three things is missing or not properly being conducted, the determination is not there. One will just go up and down and up and down. Prabhupada actually said, if someone is consistent in their service, it shows the maturity of their chanting. Because despite life's difficulties, they're able to perform their service consistently. You know, one's children might be disobedient, one's children might be in difficulty, one myself might lose, one's job, but still, okay, this is just focus. Whatever it is, I'll do my best, but this is why I'm doing everything. And that determination is the hardest thing to maintain, which is the importance of these three principles of sadhana. Anyone who's steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. This is the Olympic school of training for spiritual realization, actually. This is the system of training. And as much as, for example, when athletes go for high-level competitions, they're given a training regime, and we think, oh wow, they're going to such schools. The Bhagavad Gita is exactly that kind of school for this depth of spiritual realization. It is as confidential, as wonderful. And even though we've heard these verses so many times and they appear like cliches, a simple application gives so much depth of advancement and realization. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then it's kind of like, when we say about love and devotion, which comes from heart and mind, and then we need to train it, but bhakti isn't clear about that.
So you're saying that why do we involve the mind and intelligence when bhakti comes from the heart? Okay, because our mind and intelligence get in the way. So we have to purify them. Our mind and intelligence are in the original spiritual state, we have our own spiritual intelligence and mind, which is perfectly in concordance with one's heart. So therefore, the advanced devotees are called Raga Nuga Bhaktis, or Ragatmika Bhaktis, whose Atma is Raga, spontaneity in devotional service to the Lord. But to get to that level of spontaneity, one has to retrain the current spontaneity that we have, which is naturally towards Maya. And so to prevent that material spontaneity, one has to train one's intelligence and mind so that one can retrain oneself and go in a different direction. Does that satisfy that question? In the Varnashrama institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order sannyas, this is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. This is not to say that everybody needs to take sannyas, but the point is that we all have to renounce certain habits or certain conditionings in our life. And the moment you're trying to change a habit, there is a level of pain. There is a level of mental addiction to that routine, to that habit, whatever it may be. Some devotees are addicted to their phones or to their PlayStations or to sports, or some devotees, like in India, they love street food. And so they can't live without pani puri or pav bhaji. And there's a specific shop where they go and just eat these things. But giving up that habit requires this level of tolerance. Okay, just move on. But then after some time it becomes natural. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependent young wife as well as old mother had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. Now in the next 4 verses, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. For the next 9 verses, Krishna will now, having described, 1, the eternal difference between the soul, Supreme Spirit soul, and everyone else for all eternity, before, as in Arjuna, Supreme Soul, and everybody else. In other words, the difference between Spirit Soul and Supreme Soul, past, present, and future, in describing that if one tolerates any difficulties in between, as one is attempting to practice one's duty, one will actually achieve the highest stages of spiritual realization. So Krishna, in these four verses, 12, 13, 14, and 15, he has described the process of achieving liberation from a basic understanding of spirit, matter, and Supreme Soul. But to now describe the knowledge of spirit and matter in elaborate detail, in 9 verses, Krishna will distinguish the characteristics of spirit and the characteristics of matter. And that will go up to verse 25. And at 30, after verse 30, Krishna will change. 31, Krishna will change his direction of argument. But Krishna establishes this basic point of the difference between body and soul, because this is a foundation for every kind of transcendentalist. When we as devotees come into Krishna consciousness, we can speak about so many high-level topics, but if this foundation is not there, and it's a foundation that has to be reasserted for us at different stages of life, then the rest, all the other more topics that build on this foundation don't make sense. But this foundation, to make sure that it's in place for Arjuna, in 9 verses, Krishna will describe this difference. So we'll end here. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. So just a small announcement. From next week onwards, it'll be nice. From 9:45 to 10, we will have kirtan. And it'll be nice if all of us can come together, if possible, if practical, to share kirtan together as a group. It's not just, we're all not individuals. As a group, let's come together and experience kirtan. I think if anybody would like to lead kirtan at that time, please contact Kate Mataji. She will roster you into the kirtan. And you can come yourself with kartals. If you would like a mridanga player, see if there's another devotee whom you'd like to bring with you to play mridanga or harmonium. But, please, it would be lovely if you'd like to sing. Now, the second part of this is that some devotees have expressed concern regarding verse memorization. So one idea I had in mind was that for 8 minutes before the class, or 7 minutes before the class, exactly, we'll have kirtan. For about 8 minutes or so before the class, we can practice verse memorization from next week. How many would like this? Okay, so let's do that. We'll be focusing on everything in the first 6 chapters. I think it's only like 5-6 verses, right? It's a lot more? Oh, even better. No, we'll do it, huh?
So which ones would you spoke last week, you said those 2 to 4, but there's...
It's a lot more. In the handbook that is there, I think that I'll send out the verse references a little later on. The exact ones that we need to memorize.
And there's... It's just for module 1, isn't it?
From module 1, yes.
So in the first handout, it says where...
Does anybody have the handout with them?
Yes.
And it says what verses we're supposed to be up to by the end of module 1. So that up to 6:47 verse.
Yes.